He changed the numbers, Mr. Greer, the man with the silver tie. The voice was small and serious, coming from somewhere behind the row of archival boxes stacked along the east wall of the document room. Benton Greer had been standing at the long sorting table on the 29th floor of the Cavendish Tower. A red tab closing binder open to the signature page in front of him, and a green pen uncapped in his right hand. He had been, until that moment, 4 minutes away from initialing the closing documents on the largest transaction of his 41-year career. He set the pen down. Benton was 64 years old. He had practiced corporate law in Toronto since before half the associates in this building had been born. He had closed mergers in 3 recessions and 1 pandemic, had signed documents under subpoena and under threat, and once, in a hospital room in Sudbury while recovering from a procedure he had told no one about except his daughter. He had been in rooms where powerful people said dangerous things, and other powerful people pretended not to hear them. He had never, in 4 decades, been interrupted at a signing table by a voice from behind a stack of archival boxes. He moved around the end of the sorting table. The boy was sitting cross-legged on the floor between the boxes and the window, a math textbook open on his lap and a half-eaten cheese sandwich on the floor beside him. He was perhaps 10 years old, perhaps 11. He was wearing a gray hoodie and dark track pants, and he had the particular stillness of a child who has been taught to take up as little space as possible in rooms that were not built for him. He looked up at Benton with the calm, measuring expression of someone who has said a difficult thing and is now waiting to find out whether it was worth saying. Benton recognized him. His name was Dayo Okonkwo. His mother, Ngozi, worked the evening cleaning shift on the 28th and 29th floors and had, for the past 6 years, brought Dayo to the office on the occasional Friday when his school had a professional development day, and her sister, who normally watched him, was unavailable. Dayo would sit in the staff kitchen with his schoolwork and whatever she had packed him for dinner, and Benton had walked past him perhaps a dozen times over those years. Once, on a wet November evening, when Benton had come back late from a client dinner, he had stopped and given the boy the last granola bar from the basket on the kitchen counter. Dayo had said thank you with the quiet, formal courtesy of a child who had been carefully raised. Benton had never learned what grade he was in. He had never asked. He crouched down to the boy's level. Not all the way. His knees at 64 were honest about their limitations, but enough to put his face closer to the boy's, close enough to see that the calm in his expression was not the blank calm of a child who did not understand what he had said. It was the steady, deliberate calm of one who understood precisely. Dayo, Benton said, tell me what you saw. Dayo looked at the closed door of the document room. Then he looked back at Benton. The man with the silver tie came in here about half an hour ago, he said. I came in because Mum said I could use this room to spread out my things. She left the door unlocked. He didn't see me when he came in. I was behind the boxes. Go on. He had a laptop. He opened a file. I could see the screen from the side. It had a lot of pages. He was on the phone at the same time. Dayo paused. He had the look of a child who had been doing something his mother had taught him to do when information was important, holding the exact words in memory, not approximating. He said, I've updated Schedule 4. He'll initial every tab without reading the bodies. He hasn't read a schedule in 10 years. The clients aren't going to catch it either. They'll be watching the principal pages. Benton Greer was very still. Then the man closed the laptop, Dayo continued, and he took a folder from the table and walked out. He didn't look in my direction once. Are you certain of the words he used? Not the general idea, the specific words. He'll initial every tab without reading the bodies. Yes, sir. That's what he said. I said them over and over in my head so I wouldn't forget. Like Mum taught me to do when something needs to be remembered exactly. Benton looked at the boy for a long moment. He had tried cases before juries and arbitration panels and international tribunals. He had spent 4 decades reading the faces of people telling the truth, and people telling a carefully constructed version of it. The face of a child under pressure, he had learned long ago, was the one face that could not be coached into deception. Dayo Okonkwo's was not performing. He was reporting. Benton stood. His knees registered their complaint. The man with the silver tie was Piers Radcliffe. Piers was the managing partner for transactional practice at Greer, Calder & Associates, a position he had held for 11 years. Before that, he had been a senior associate. And before that, an articling student, Benton, had personally selected from 3 competing candidates in the autumn of 2007. Piers was 46, precise and genial, and meticulous in the way of lawyers who understood that meticulous was a reputation worth cultivating deliberately. He had a wife and 3 children. He played hockey in a recreational league on Wednesday evenings. Benton had attended the christening of his youngest daughter. Piers was currently in the 41st floor boardroom with the principals from Meridian Resources and the acquisition team from Northland Capital, the Vancouver-based fund purchasing Meridian in a transaction valued at $2.1 billion. The transaction Benton had led personally. The closing documents he had been about to initial downstairs, in the quiet of the document room, away from the boardroom theater of handshakes and photographs, including specifically the closing documents in Schedule 4. Schedule 4 of the Meridian closing binder contained, among other things, the legal fee schedule, a document setting out the firm's professional fees for services rendered over the 18-month transaction. The negotiated amount was $850,000 plus disbursements. Benton had signed off on that figure personally in January. He had not read the body of Schedule 4 today. He had been initialing tabs. Benton walked to the sorting table. He picked up the closing binder. He turned to Schedule 4. He read it once the way he read documents when he trusted the person who had prepared them. Quickly, for structure, not for substance. Then, he read it again the way he had learned to read documents before he had ever trusted anyone. Slowly, the way a person reads something when he already suspects what it says. The professional fee on page 2 of Schedule 4 stated the firm's total fee as $8,500,000. Benton read the number twice. He set the binder back on the table. He rested both hands flat on the surface and looked at the number for 4 full seconds. A decimal point does not move itself. He looked up at Deo. "You did the right thing," he said. It came out more quietly than he intended. "I need you to stay in this room. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "If anyone comes through that door, anyone except me, I need you to stay behind those boxes and make no sound. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Benton walked to the wall beside the fire door. There was a house phone mounted at shoulder height in a gray cradle. He lifted it. Winifred. His executive assistant, Winifred Cho, answered on the first ring. She had been with Benton for 22 years, and she answered on the first ring the way she had done for 22 years, regardless of what she was doing when the call came. "I need you to listen carefully and not react to what I say." A pause. "Of course." "First, call Yemi Adeyemi in compliance. Tell her to come to the 29th floor document room immediately. Tell her to bring the audit access credentials for the document management system. Do not tell her why. Do not use the internal messaging system. Call her on her mobile." "Understood." "Second, go to the vault on the 27th floor. I need the sealed original of the Meridian closing binder, the copy that was delivered by courier from Northland's Council on Tuesday morning and logged in under the green seal. Not the working copy. The sealed original. Sign it out personally under your own credentials. I'll need the managing partner's counter-authorization for the vault. Use mine. I'll ratify it in the system when I'm back at my desk. If there's a flag, tell them I authorized it verbally and am standing by to confirm." A brief silence. "I understand." "Third, call Ngozi Okonkwo. She'll be on the 28th floor. Tell her that her son is with me and that he is completely safe. Tell her I need 5 minutes and I will explain everything. Ask her to come to this floor through the service stairwell, not the main elevators, and to come directly to the document room. I'll do that now. Fourth, go back to your desk. Keep the boardroom line open. If Piers or anyone from the transaction team calls asking for an update on the initialing, tell them I asked for an additional 20 minutes to review the schedule summaries. Sound unhurried. Buy me the time." Winifred Cho said, in the even voice of a woman who had worked at the top of Bay Street long enough to know when the ground beneath it was quietly rearranging itself. "I'll hold the line." Benton put the phone down. He estimated 7 minutes before someone from the boardroom thought to check on progress. He used them. He used the first 2 to read Schedule 4 a third time, carefully now, looking not just at the fee total but at the subschedules on pages 3 and 4. He found what he had begun to suspect was there, a clause in Subschedule 4A, set in the compressed legal font that transactional documents used when they were meant to look thorough without inviting close reading. The clause established what it called a value alignment fee, a contingent payment arrangement payable to a numbered company registered in Alberta, totaling 3.2% of the aggregate appraised value of Meridian's mineral assets upon transfer of title. At Meridian's current assessed valuation, 3.2% came to $67 million. The numbered company's registration number was in the clause. Benton read it. He would not need to trace it far. He had worked with lawyers for a long time. He knew when a numbered company had been registered in Alberta by someone who had grown up in Calgary and kept their original provincial connections. He used the next 2 minutes to think about Piers Radcliffe, whom he had mentored for 16 years, whose articling interview he still remembered, who had been by every visible measure the best investment he had made in a human being since hiring Winifred Cho. He thought about the Christmas lunches and the recommendation letters and the afternoon 2 years ago when Piers's father had died in a care home in Hamilton, and Benton had driven there himself, a 3-hour round trip, to sit with him for an hour in the visitor's lounge, because that was what you did when someone had given you 16 years of their life. He thought about all of it, in the precise, unhurried way of a man who is arriving at a long story's true ending. He used the last 3 minutes to prepare his face for what was coming through the door. Yemi Adeyemi arrived first, carrying a slim black laptop and the precise expression of a woman who had been told almost nothing and understood almost everything. She had worked in compliance for 9 years, and she had the quality Benton valued above all others in a compliance professional. She did not ask questions before she knew whether asking would help or harm. "Yemi," Benton said, "pull the document management system record for Schedule 4 of the Meridian closing binder, the working copy. I need to see every save and checkout event in the audit trail for the past 72 hours. Yemi opened the laptop. Her fingers moved. She turned the screen toward Benton without speaking. "The last modification. Time and workstation. 6:43 this evening," Yemi said. "Checked out from Mr. Radcliffe's workstation credentials. Checked back in at 6:51. Benton nodded once, very slowly. "What was in it before 6:43? Yemi's fingers moved again. She read from the previous version. "Professional fees, $850,000. Subschedule 4 not present. Capture these records with a timestamp and save them to a secure compliance folder that Piers Radcliffe does not have access to. Do it now, before anything else." She did it. Winifred came through the door next, carrying a black binder sealed with green courier tape and a tamper-evident label. Behind her came Ngozi Okonkwo, still in her cleaning uniform, moving quickly and quietly, and with a composed, upright dignity of a woman who had spent 8 years learning how to walk through the floors of this building without drawing attention to herself. She saw Dio standing beside the archival boxes, holding his math textbook, and she stopped. She did not rush toward him. She looked at his face, searching it the way a mother searches a child's face when she has been told he is safe, but needs to see the safety for herself, and Dio gave her a small, single nod. The nod said, "I'm all right. I did what I should have done." Ngozi's shoulders came down half an inch. "Ngozi," Benton said quietly, "your son told me something important this evening. I will explain all of it to you in full. For now, I need to ask you to trust me for the next 15 minutes. Can you do that?" She looked at him. "Yes, Mr. Greer." "Please stand with Dio. If he looks to you at any point, I would like you to look back at him so he knows you're there. That is all I need from you right now." Benton broke the green seal on the original binder. He turned to Schedule 4, page 2. He read the professional fee figure aloud in the quiet, unhurried voice he used in court when he wanted a number to land in a room without emotional coloring attached to it. Without emphasis, without anything a listener might later claim had influenced their understanding. He said the number the way a number deserved to be said when it was simply the truth. $850,000. He closed the original binder. He set it to his left. He set the working copy to his right. "Yemi," he said. "When asked, I need you to say exactly what you just told me, timestamp and workstation included." "I will," she said. Benton walked to the door. He opened it. He looked down the corridor toward the elevator bank and he waited. Piers Radcliffe came around the corner at 7 minutes, moving with the easy, economic stride of a man who had been managing the pace of other people's time for so long that his own movements had synchronized with it. He was wearing the gray suit, the silver tie. He was holding a legal pad and a coffee in a paper cup, and he was speaking quietly into his mobile phone, not with urgency but with the relaxed, wrapping-up quality of a man concluding the last business of a day he already considered finished. He saw Benton in the doorway and raised his chin in acknowledgement. He ended the call. He walked to the door. "Almost done up there," he said. "Northland's ready whenever you are. Everyone's in good spirits." He looked past Benton into the room and saw Yemi Adeyemi at the table with the laptop. He saw Winifred standing near the window. He saw the 2 binders on the sorting table, the torn green seal lying between them. And then he saw Ngozi Okonkwo standing against the east wall and the boy standing beside her. His face did not change. This is the first thing Benton would carry with him afterward as the moment that removed his last uncertainty. A man who had made an error, a clerical error, a miscommunication, a genuine and horrifying accident, would have looked at that room and felt his confusion openly. A man who had not made an error would look at that room and show nothing for exactly one beat, too long before he began to manage the situation. Piers Radcliffe showed nothing for exactly one beat too long. Then he smiled. "Are we having a late addition to the team? Wasn't aware compliance was joining us on the Meridian Close." "Come in," Benton said. "Close the door." Piers came in. He closed the door. He did not move toward the table. He stood at a slight distance from it, the paper cup in one hand and the legal pad in the other, in the small, patient pause of a man deciding whether what he was looking at required management or simply reassurance. "Before we go up to the boardroom," Benton said, "I have a question. It is a simple question, and it has a simple answer. In Schedule 4 of the working binder, the copy that has been circulating this week, what is the stated professional fee on page 2? Piers looked at Benton across the sorting table. He looked at the two binders, and Benton watched him, in the space of that look, calculate whether the question was being asked by a man who had read the figure or by a man testing a suspicion. Benton had asked it in the specific neutral tone he used when he already knew the answer. Piers had spent 16 years in enough rooms with Benton to recognize that tone. 850,000, Piers said, as negotiated in January. "Yemi," Benton said, without looking away from Piers. "What is the professional fee as it currently reads on page 2 of the working binder in front of you?" Yemi Adeyemi turned the laptop screen toward Piers Radcliffe. $8,500,000, she said, and a subschedule 4C that was not present in any version of this document prior to 6:43 this evening. Piers looked at the screen. He looked at Benton. He set the paper cup down on the end of the sorting table with the same careful precision with which he had always set things down in rooms, where precision was the expected standard. A man who had not done this before would have reached for the binder. He would have reached for it immediately, with the reflexive, horrified speed of a professional confronted with a catastrophic error bearing his name. He would have read the clause aloud, and he would have said, with the appropriate stunned disbelief, that he had no idea how this had happened. That the version he reviewed yesterday had been correct. That something had clearly gone wrong in the final compilation, and he would personally get to the bottom of it tonight. Piers Radcliffe did not reach for the binder. He looked at Benton for a long moment. He looked at Yemi. He looked at Winifred. And then, in the way of a man making a final calculation, his eyes moved along the east wall to where Ngozi Okonkwo was standing, and to the boy beside her. Dayo Okonkwo was looking at his hands. He was looking at them the way Benton had asked him to look at them, with the steady, deliberate attention of a child who has been given a task and intends to complete it correctly. He did not look up. And Benton saw, in the precise way that he had seen a great many things that evening, the exact moment when Piers Radcliffe understood. Not who had found him out. He had worked that out when he saw the room. But how? How completely? How a child doing his homework by the window on a Friday evening had held 4 words in memory long enough to walk through a corridor and say them to the right person. "The document was modified on your workstation at 6:43 this evening," Benton said. His voice had not changed register since the moment Piers walked through the door, and it would not change now. He had practiced law for 41 years. He had learned very early that the voice that controlled a room was never the one that raised itself. The sealed original shows $850,000. No subschedule 4C. The numbered company in 4C is registered in Alberta. I do not need to trace it further tonight, but I will, and you know what I will find." Piers said nothing. "I am going to ask you to do 3 things," Benton said. "First, you will call your personal counsel tonight, before any other call. Second, you will leave this building now. Not through the boardroom, not past the Meridian or Northland teams, through the service elevator to the lobby. Winifred will accompany you as far as the main floor. Third, you will not contact anyone on this transaction or in this firm until your counsel has advised you. Not tonight, not this weekend." He paused. "The reason I am asking you to leave this way, quietly, without an audience, is not for your sake, Piers. It is for the people who have worked in this building for a long time. They do not need the memory of how this evening ended to become the image that defines what this firm is to them. That is the only courtesy I am offering, and I am offering it to them." Piers Radcliffe picked up his legal pad. He left the coffee. He walked to the door and put his hand on the handle, and he paused there for a moment in the way of a man who is deciding whether to say a last word, some appeal, some explanation, some invocation of the 16 years between them. Then he opened the door and walked out, and Winifred Cho followed him without a word, and the document room was very quiet. Benton stood at the head of the sorting table and looked at the two binders and the torn green seal lying between them. He was aware of the particular quality of silence that settles in a room after something that has been building for a long time has finally stopped building. He turned to Yemi. I need to be on the phone with the Law Society's trust accounting line within the hour. Preserve everything with timestamps. The Meridian close will proceed Monday morning with the sealed original. Please tell the boardroom there is a technical complication with the document, compilation, and we will reconvene at 9. Give them my apologies. Tell them dinner tonight is on the firm. I'll handle it, Yemi said, and she left. Benton turned to Dio. Dio was still standing beside the archival boxes, his math textbook held flat against his chest, his mother's hand resting lightly on his shoulder. He had not moved from that position since Piers Radcliffe had come through the door. He was looking at Benton now with the same steady measuring expression he had used at the very beginning of the evening, when he had said a difficult thing, and waited to find out if it had been worth saying. Dio, Benton said, come here. The boy walked forward. Benton looked at him for a moment. He was 64 years old, and he had been in rooms like this one for most of his professional life. And he was not a man who was easily moved, but he was aware, standing in front of this child, that what he felt was not the professional satisfaction of a crisis averted. It was something older and simpler than that. You did something very difficult tonight, he said. You spoke when it would have been far easier not to. You held the exact words and you brought them to the right person at the right moment. Do you understand how rare that is? Dio considered the question rather than simply accepting the compliment. Mum always says, he said after a moment, that the words you remember exactly are the ones you decide to remember. You have to decide on purpose. Benton looked at Ngozi Okonkwo. She was looking back at him with an expression he recognized. Not gratitude alone, not relief alone, not pride alone, though all three were present, but the composed, watchful expression of a woman who had been managing uncertainty for a very long time and had not yet fully decided whether this particular moment was safe enough to let herself feel what she was feeling. Ngozi, he said, I would like to take you and Dio to dinner. Tonight if you are willing, or another evening if you prefer. There are things I would like to say to both of you that this room is not the right room for. Ngozi looked at her son. Dio gave her a small single nod. The same nod he had given her when she first walked through the door. The nod of a child communicating across a room that everything was all right, that she could let herself relax. Tonight is fine, Ngozi said. Thank you, Mr. Greer. What followed in the months after that, Friday evening, moved with the particular grinding weight of professional accountability in a regulated industry. Piers Radcliffe resigned from the firm on the Monday morning in a letter of 3 sentences that said nothing and implied everything. The Law Society of Ontario opened a conduct review by the end of that week. The review ran 9 months and produced a report of considerable length, and at the end of it, Piers was struck from the role. He was 46 years old. He had been a lawyer for 20 years. The Police Financial Crimes Unit opened a parallel investigation after Yemi Adeyemi's audit traced the Alberta Numbered Company and found, behind it, a layered arrangement that had been quietly diverting a percentage of disbursement handling fees from firm accounts over a period of 8 years. The total was recovered in its near entirety through a civil process. Piers Radcliffe faced 12 charges. He pleaded to 7. He was sentenced the following spring. Benton did not attend the sentencing hearing. The Meridian acquisition closed on the Monday morning as scheduled, with the correct fee schedule, and the properties performed over the following years exactly as the transaction modeling had projected. Ngozi Okonkwo moved out of the cleaning division the following September into an administrative coordinator role that had been restructured around her particular skills, a role that came with different hours and a salary that allowed her, by the spring, to move with Dio from the apartment in Scarborough to a 3-bedroom house where the schools were considerably better. She still ironed Dio's clothes every morning before school. When Benton mentioned once that she might consider leaving that particular task to the boy, he was 12 now and not without capability, she told Benton. In the direct and pleasant way she told him most things. That ironing her son's clothes in the morning was not the part of her morning she was prepared to hand over to anyone. Dio Okonkwo was enrolled in September in a small preparatory school in the East End that Benton had supported quietly for many years through a scholarship endowment that until that autumn had never quite found the right recipient. He took to it with the careful, deliberate pace of a child who understood that every room he entered had been arrived at through effort, and that effort was the correct response to it. By the end of his first year, he was at the top of his cohort in mathematics and history, and he had asked his English teacher, in a quiet conversation after class, whether a person could become a judge. Not a lawyer, but a judge, because he had been thinking for some time about how certain words, said, at the right moment in the right room, could change the shape of what happened to people who were not yet in a position to speak for themselves. Benton Greer heard about that conversation secondhand from the teacher, who mentioned it at a fundraising dinner the following winter. He did not tell Deo that he had heard it. He thought about it for a long time on the drive home. There are things that the great law firms of this country say about themselves. They say that their partners know what happens in their files. They say that due diligence is thorough and supervision is consistent, and the work that goes out under the firm's name reflects the values the firm was built on. These things are said, and they are largely meant, and they are largely true. Until they are not. The truth of what happens in those offices, in the document rooms, and the quiet filing floors, and the corridors that connect the places where decisions are made, is almost always known first by the people who empty the recycling bins and clean the glass and walk through the building in the hours when the partners have gone home. The people who have learned to be unobtrusive in rooms that were not designed with them in mind. Learn the names of the children of the people who keep your building running. When a boy who has been taught to be invisible in a room you own stands up from behind a stack of archival boxes and tells you in the careful exact words of a child who decided to remember something on purpose, that the numbers have been changed, set down your pen, ask him to tell you again. The bravest voice in any room is almost never the one at the head of the table, and sometimes the truth that has been quietly accumulating for years needs only one person willing to say it out loud, a child, doing his homework by the window on a Friday evening, who decided that what he had heard was too important to keep to himself.